The complete story of Bardock's time on the planet Cereal has just been revealed to our many characters, and Goku has been forever changed by it. Unfortunately, Granola was not able to get the full rundown since he got gunned down recently, but hey, at least he knows Bardock saved him. Goku, Vegeta, and even Minaito, who'd never actually received the complete account of these events himself on account of being knocked out at the time, would all just stand there in awe. Goku would then begin to hold his head, still in the midst of processing everything. Minaito would then reiterate that Bardock vacated the planet immediately after being able to walk again, and only left his damaged scouter behind. Now Goku, in consideration of this, would begin to recall his time as an infant within his tank. As he opened his eyes, he'd observed his father Bardock, who had arrived from the planet Cereal, injuries and all. And we know this is from then on account of the damage to his shoulder pads. Jine, Goku's mom, would attempt to help her husband out, but what's interesting is that beyond being concerned for himself, Bardock made his way over to Goku's tank and smiled, which just further emphasizes the priority he places on his children's well-being over his own. Very much like how in the midst of facing Gas, his wish was related to the betterment of his kids' futures instead of something to help him out. And we will actually be talking a bit more about that wish in particular of his in just a moment. The infant Goku would then be seen falling asleep again, as later on, things would return back to normal as Bardock would leave for another mission, while Jine remained holding the hand of a young Raditz. And you know, I've said this in previous videos, but I do feel like Raditz deserves a second chance at life. But to be fair, I do find it hard to imagine anyone caring enough to bring him back into the fold. Shifting to later points in time, we would have several shots at Jine just living her life in the absence of Bardock. Later on, we would have Goku being abruptly awoken by the concerned visage of Bardock. Goku would then be removed from his tank, geared up, and placed into a pod to be sent off-world. Now, as he recalled these infantile events, Goku would express to Vegeta that he feels like he finally understands the concept of Saiyan pride, which is huge. I mean, it is something Vegeta has spoken about since the very beginning, and here it's almost presented to be something intrinsic to their people that Goku lost along with his memories back when he was only just a baby. However, now with his memories having flooded back, along with the visage of his father, Goku has also remembered what Saiyan pride truly is, expressing that he hasn't had total faith in his power, which I find to be a bit strange. I mean, I have a pretty hard time believing this to be the case, considering just how certain of his own capabilities Goku has been throughout the entirety of the series, and even just with the previous arc and his Ultra Instinct handling of Moro, but sure, whatever you say. From there, Vegeta would let it be known that he too had somewhat lost sight of what Saiyan pride truly is, as he mistook his burden for the sins of his people as opposed to their pride. So in a sense, in his pursuit of atonement for the man he once was, Vegeta's conceptualization of Saiyan pride began to shift. Bardock's story helped further illustrate to Vegeta the error of such thinking, and it makes a whole lot of sense. Bardock was certainly a prideful Saiyan that truly embodied the best of his people as a warrior, but that did not stop him from being sentimental and caring for others. He is genuinely the perfect middle ground between the two extremes, whose escapades have certainly provided a bit of enlightenment for both Goku and Vegeta. But on the point of that aforementioned wish, Vegeta would serve to further corroborate and ultimately confirm the notion that the survival of Goku and Raditz were on account of Bardock's Dragon Ball based wish. A rather fascinating revelation indeed. But if that's to be considered the full extent of the wish, then I can't say I have any complaints really. It's kinda just interesting to know. And to me, it is pretty nice that Raditz has been brought up so much recently. I mean, they could have just as easily disregarded his existence entirely, but they didn't, and that's pretty good for Dragon Ball in my book. Vegeta would express his frustrations with such knowledge, however, seemingly alluding to there being more to the wish than mere survival, as he'd highlight the point of them thriving and such. So essentially, Vegeta now knows the source of Goku's plot armor and is not happy about it. But when Vegeta called Goku and his brother pampered, Goku would clap back at him by bringing up how much Vegeta pampers his daughter Bra, which I find to be funny because that is a far cry from how he treated Trunks early on. And this is especially funny coming from a Saiyan royal. But to be fair, it sure as hell wasn't a sweet childhood for Vegeta. As Vegeta yelled at Goku, Minaito reminisced a bit about Bardock and considered the humorous way in which his will has been passed down. He would then express to the two that the pride of a people isn't tied to the atonement of past sins, nor is it about seeking or claiming revenge. In essence, it ultimately boiled down to the acceptance of one's nature and the dedication to one's own convictions, which goes back to what we said about what Goku lacked, an acknowledgement and acceptance of the person he is at his core. And it would seem that that hurdle may have been overcome on account of this remembrance. So certainly there is the potential for Goku to take Ultra Instinct to the next level. A level tailor-made for him at some point during this arc. Also, Minaito, as the sole survivor of his people, at least as far as he's aware, is the perfect figure to pass on this wisdom for sure. However, and I've been meaning to bring this up in a video at some point, considering Namekians reproduce asexually, why is it that over the course of 40 years, Minaito hasn't repopulated his tribe? I mean, is there a fertility issue or something? Like, I get that he's old, but his people can live for centuries, so what's going on there? Granola couldn't have possibly been that much of a handful. Monaito would then urge the two Saiyan warriors to approach him as he intended to heal them up a bit before the return of Gas. However, before doing so, he intended to fix up their attire, from which point he would dress them in Saiyan armor, almost identical to that of Bardock's, really going in on the whole Saiyan pride subject matter. But it admittedly was a bit much for the two who'd rather just have patched up versions of their previous attire instead. Even Vegeta, who used to dress similarly in full confidence, was not a fan, which is really funny to me. It's kind of like if someone forced you to dress like you had a decade ago. Some folks would be just fine with that, but most I imagine would cringe instead. But as Monaito healed these two up, a pretty slow process indeed since his healing capabilities are especially limited, Gas in his aggravation would race through space until finally he was able to lock onto the key signature of Goku and instant transmission to his location. And if you're ready to lock into more content from us, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on. It only takes an instant after all. But slamming down just outside of Monaito's home, his immense power would immediately be sensed and recognized by the group. Gas would then command them to vacate the abode and face him. Oil would notice the return of his younger brother and immediately inform his other siblings. Alec would then decide that they would move their ship just close enough to observe the battle, but avoid getting too close. Oil would then inquire into the well-being of Gas by asking him how he was feeling. Gas understandably was not in the best mood on account of the fact that Goku played him for a fool, but would have Oil inform Alec that he'd be done dealing with these guys momentarily. This certainly pleased Oil, who'd promise his little brother a great meal afterwards. From there, Goku and Vegeta would step out in dead stock kicks and fresh fits, ready to face their bully. Gas expected them to run away while they still could, but as far as they were concerned, they weren't the ones who needed to leave, which Gas fully intended to do once he was done killing the two of them. Vegeta would then express to Goku his desire to take Gas down, even if it killed him, wondering how Goku felt. A sentiment I imagine we all perceive to be similar to what Bardock displayed previously. However, with Goku unwilling to leave all the fun to Vegeta, this time around, the two would fight alongside one another, which is always just such a hype time. They would charge up, and Goku would declare himself to be the one to put an end to it all, which Vegeta would of course refuse to let be the case. As we would then have this extremely badass shot of them both in their Ultra forms, which just goes way too hard. I for one am a big fan of these transformations, so seeing them side by side like this is such a treat. The eruption of power to be seen from these two was just unreal, the likes of which would somewhat stun Gas, while Maki and Alec observed from a distance. Maki would immediately become concerned on account of these transformations, from which point Oil would provide a crude summation of their names, which Maki was not interested in at all. Rather, she was far more invested in whether or not they were powerful, which Oil, having been observing this ongoing bout more than anyone else, would confirm that yes, they definitely were incredibly strong. Meanwhile, the ever-calculated Alec would remain silent all throughout. Gas would recognize their intentions to gang up on him, but would dismiss it as a foolish scheme since the difference between their capabilities, even if combined, was far too great. But these two would correct him, as they really and truly did not care about the odds of winning. What drove them was simply the desire to win itself. From there, the two fighters would rush in side by side as next, Vegeta would hover above, sweeping back his leg for a kick, while Goku remained low as he reeled back a fist. Gas would remain fixed in place, prepared for the two attacks, allowing him to effectively defend against both of them simultaneously. And man, the expressions of everyone involved were incredibly serious. These efforts, albeit very well coordinated, did not impress Gas at all, as thus far, they had failed to exceed his expectations. The two Saiyans would jump back from there before Goku would rush in and attempt a kick of his own, which would be evaded. And honestly, this for me is the greatest indicator of Gas' capabilities and how incredible his power truly is. For him to be avoiding a master Ultra Instinct Goku like this is unreal. Vegeta would re-enter the mix next, taking a swing at Gas and missing, just before Goku would do similarly and send a barrage of evaded fists towards the heater. When that wasn't working, Goku would switch to kicks in a similar manner as Vegeta leapt up high and crashed down towards Gas, who again managed to evade him. But now suspended in the air, Goku would teleport to Gas, continuing the very same dance they were previously having on the ground. Vegeta in his frustration would jettison up to both of them and attack in unison with Goku, a sequence which, despite failing to harm him, did actually begin to overwhelm Gas, which to me says a whole lot about their chances of winning here. However, Gas would grab hold of Vegeta's fist and immediately after punch him in the face with it, which sent the prince hurtling towards the ground once more. But he'd soon be joined by Goku, who'd swiftly be kicked in the face. With next to no time to recuperate or even catch their breath, much to the shock of Gas, these two would not let up and attack yet again. They would rush him simultaneously and rather clearly give the guy a tough time. The two would continue after the adversary until eventually he would land. And once he had seen that to fruition, he would unleash a devastating ki blast, which thankfully, they both recognized preemptively, allowing them the chance to elevate above it and begin to let loose attacks of their own. In response, Goss would teleport behind the two of them, materialize a spiked mace, and hit Vegeta with it. An action which would catch Goku off guard while in his Ultra Instinct state, which is especially difficult to pull off. Once Goku was the only one within range of him, Goss would set his sights on him, followed by the tossing of his weapon for the sake of issuing a major kick directed onto the man's stomach, which again is so major. Hitting Goku in Ultra Instinct is hard enough, but to deal actual damage onto his reinforced body is even harder. And here, it really does look like Goku is feeling the pain. Only furthermore made the case when Goss begins to stomp him out, and Goss would be one of those guys who rushes to racist insults the moment he gets upset. But while he was busy figuring out what slurs to say, Vegeta was behind him charging up a ball of destruction, declaring it to be a god of destruction technique capable of erasing mortals and urging Goku to get out of the way. And as he launched it, Vegeta would issue a challenge to this so-called strongest in the universe. Goku would be quick to just teleport away, while Goss easily could have done so as well. But one thing about Goss is that he feels the need to prove himself to and against others, prompting him to instead face this challenge head on. With a shield, he would resist the attack, but it truly was formidable, and only made that much more so once Goku joined in after teleporting. From this, the shield of Goss would begin to degrade, and really and truly, the action to be seen in these Dragon Ball Super chapters are always so interesting to follow along with, that it is really not hard to imagine how phenomenal they will be once animated. Maki would express concern for their struggling sibling with this one, as Goss was in fact losing a bit of ground. But that's when Alec would break his silence, asking Oil if their enemies had already used these transformations previously. Which Oil would confirm that yes they did, while they were fighting Granola in fact. A response which reassured Alec of their victory in this bout considering the chronological order of their wish coming after all these events. Maki would then ask if their brother's victory was certain, and Alec would let it be known that he expected them to team up against Goss, but as the strongest in the universe, Goss was stronger than Granola was. Granola, who managed to successfully fend the two off, then confidently telling his brother and sister to just watch. And given the limited information available to him, sure, Alec's perspective is pretty well justified. However, as we all know, Saiyan growth and power increases are far more nuanced than just that. I mean, considering a Saiyan, the father of one currently involved in fact, managed to whoop his brother before, you would think that such an intelligence-based strategist such as Alec would have sought some semblance of information on their kind before roping them into this conflict. But I guess he'll just have to learn his lesson the hard way. Back to the fight, Goss, despite previously struggling, would actually manage to begin sending the Orb of Destruction back to its senders. Eventually, the two would recognize the futility of their resistance, and from there, Vegeta, funnily enough, would leave the problem up to Goku, who couldn't believe it, and was left to strain against the issue. Vegeta instead would go after Goss directly yet again, but be kicked in the stomach just like Goku had been before. But unlike Goku, unbeknownst to Goss, Vegeta in this form is a bit of a masochist, so all this punishment was actually beneficial to him. Goss would begin to taunt Vegeta, questioning if he'd lost too much blood and still believed victory to be achievable, which Vegeta even now certainly intended to make a reality. All the while, Goku was still struggling against the Destruction Ball. Once he began getting too close to the evacuated Shugarian city, he finally managed to relieve himself of the strain and toss the attack way up high and off-world. But with how long dealing with that issue took him, Goku would become concerned with Vegeta's well-being and teleport to him. And by the time he arrived, Vegeta was actually landing major blows onto Goss. Goss, who assumed this to be a trick, as after sustaining so much damage, Vegeta shouldn't even be able to move his body. From which point, Vegeta would happily inform their adversary that damage was nothing more than fuel for his power. Therefore, he is only getting stronger, which would really infuriate Goss, as his perceived notion that this would be a simple fight seems to be falling apart before his very eyes, making him look worse and worse in front of his big brother Alec. Dragon Ball Super continues to be a really exciting and fun read each and every month. Even if the handling of certain events hasn't been to the liking of many fans, it is really hard to deny its pretty consistent entertainment value. And hopefully you were entertained by this video. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.